The Dallas Cowboys didn't find their wide receiver 2 in the 2025 NFL Draft, but they have found him in early May, trading for George Pickens from the Pittsburgh Steelers. We got it from all angles here on Locked On NFL Scouting.
You are Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes, your daily podcast for NFL and college football scouting. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's better than this? It's guys being dudes here on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast. We're the Draft Dudes. I'm Joe Marino from Locked On Bills. He's Kyle Crabbs from Locked On Dolphins. And we are your NFL experts here with you daily to talk team building across the league on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast with the Draft Dudes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to issue a big thank you, shout out, and welcome to our everydayers. Those of you who never miss a single episode, we appreciate y'all being here very, very much. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins.
Joe, better morning to be a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, a Dallas Cowboys fan, or an Indiana Pacers fan?
Oh, I don't know the Pacers part of that.
They're up 2-0 after a Halliburton three-pointer with 1 second left against the 1-seed Cavaliers in the conference semis.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I keep forgetting that the Cavs are number 1 seed, you know?
Right.
Good for them.
Non-LeBron James Cavs are the 1 seeds. It's a kind of weird world we're living in.
We got like Boston, the Celtics, and Knicks. And that feels like that's dominating my timeline, which is pretty much how I watch the NBA. It's just whatever people are talking
whatever
about.
Passes through the, and that's the only reason I knew about what happened with the Pacers last night. So,
you know what's fun is just observing, seeing both sides of the banter heat up.
Right.
Especially two blue blood franchises like the Cowboys and Steelers. A lot of takes out there. I think I would be most excited this morning if I was a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. Is that controversial? I feel like this is I can understand the trade from both sides, but I like it most for Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I think Dallas Cowboys fans that woke up this morning and found out that they were getting George Pickens, you're going to be a more talented football team than what you were last night when you went to bed, right? The calculus of building a winning team is not always just a talent allocation prospect, which is where I think the Pickens stuff kind of gets muddy, where you're acquiring him in a contract year. I can't imagine you do this trade. We have the full terms, and this is from courtesy Dallas. It's Pickens and a 2026 6th-round pick. So, 11 months from now, a 6 and Pickens to Pittsburgh for from Pittsburgh for a 3rd-round pick next year in 2026, and then a 5th-round pick in 2027, 23 months from now.
Both of these teams have been pretty active in wide receiver trades, which one of my sayings is wide receivers get traded. That's just what happens in the NFL. But it's this deal. It's Pittsburgh acquiring DK Metcalf earlier this offseason. I think you have to lump in this Jonathan Mingo trade that Dallas pulled off last year, where it was Mingo and a 7 for a 4.
Yeah, it's a pretty handsome price point.
And they came out with some pretty direct messaging about how they viewed Mingo coming out of that draft. And so we kind of have been talking about Dallas and do they have enough meaningful weapons outside of CeeDee Lamb? And there's so much volume that goes to CeeDee Lamb. You'd like to think, at least through their eyes, they feel pretty good about the addition of Pickens to go with Mingo, with Brian Schottenheimer, who's, I think we've seen Dak Prescott play the best football of his career with Schottenheimer, with maybe some enhanced weapons here. But they've certainly done quite a bit here to try to, I think, answer that question that we've had for a while about the options in this passing game outside of CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah, and obviously they shored up the offensive line with that early draft choice in Tyler Booker, and I think made a great bet on day 3 with Ajani Cornelius to kind of maybe give him an outlook at right tackle, developmental long term. So I think you look at what they've been able to acquire and how they tackled the draft, and This was one of my favorite draft classes from a value perspective, and they didn't force it, right? They didn't force the need at wide receiver, which I think would have been very easy to do. And if Tet McMillan had made it to 12, I
was going to ask you that. You think so?
They're probably making that choice. I had heard a lot of buzz that they were pretty keen on Tet McMillan. So this being the pivot for a body type and style makes sense. I believe my comp for Tet McMillan on my 33rd team draft report was George Pickens, as far as just like the style of play and some of the body control stuff at the catch point and the catch radius that comes with that. That's not a 1-for-1, but that was kind of the things that I saw. So they've totally revamped the running back room. They fortified what they lost with the retirement of Zach Martin. Now they make this trade happen, and it is a bet against recent history as it pertains to former Pittsburgh wide receivers not playing in Pittsburgh anymore. And I think that's one of the bigger questions that I have about this move from Dallas's standpoint, which we can get into when we get into Pickens' fit with Dallas and financially fit, potentially what a contract extension looks like. We're going to get into all that in the next segment. But I think the process for Dallas was good to get to this point and then to land on an answer at a reasonable price point. We've had 4 wide receiver trades this offseason. 2 of them obviously involve Pittsburgh because Pittsburgh traded for DK Metcalf. Do you know what the 4 are?
Not quite as flashy as a couple years ago, right?
Right.
Or even last offseason. I am drawing blanks here, Kyle.
Good. And I was hoping, because this means I'm bringing value to the conversation. So we just had George Pickens and a 6 for a 3 and a 5.
And DK, right?
DK was DK and a 6 in 25. So the draft that just happened, that ended up being Will Howard's pick. For a 2 and a 7, which ended up being Damian Martinez.
Those look kind of like some fun, like day 3 players that were drafted with those throw-in picks.
Houston acquired Christian Kirk.
You forget that happened.
From Jacksonville. And that was Kirk is owed $16.2 million this year.
Yeah, that's why it was like a 7, right?
For a 2026 7. Not even a 7 this year, a 6 next year. And that happened before the draft. That happened on March 6th. And then Deebo Samuel got traded for a 5.
So I know we're going to get laser focused in on Dallas and Pittsburgh, but does this feels like it passes the sniff test in terms of like appropriate compensation for what this trade should look like?
Right, because you had players in Deebo and Christian Kirk that kind of have these injury questions, but were on pre-existing contracts with pre-existing years that they were going to be coming into. DK obviously comes in and Seattle moves him in large part because they didn't want to do the $30 million a year contract for DK Metcalf. Pittsburgh says, well, we're going to pay a big-bodied wide receiver with physicality that wins down the field. We think DK is probably the right person to give that money to as compared to George Pickens. So now let's move George Pickens, and kind of the roundabout trickle down as it becomes a 2, a 7, and George Pickens for DK a 3 to 5. It's like the roundabout way of, and not all of those picks hit in the same year, obviously, but just the raw assets in and raw assets out. They kind of flipped 1 for 1 and moved down with their marquee asset and said, hey, this is the guy we want to give the money to.
Before we get into this next segment, which we will focus in on Pickens and his fit with Dallas, I want to ask you one last question.
Okay.
Is this the last wide receiver trade?
No.
Before the deadline? Well, there's a qualifier.
Okay.
That includes a day 2 pick or better.
Before the trade deadline this year? That involves a day 2 pick?
Well, there'll be another receiver that's gained 1,000 yards in a season receiving that'll get traded.
If there is, I don't know that they would go for a day 2 pick.
All right. We will see. Wide receivers get traded. We'll see what else happens on that front. All right, lasering in on Pickens' fit with Dallas on the other side of it, folks. Be sure to stick with us. Say goodbye to sticky notes, scribbled plans on the fridge, and overlapping calendar invites. The Skylight calendar is here to bring clarity to the chaos and help families stay organized without stress. This sleek digital display syncs with our existing calendars like Google, Apple, Outlook, and more, making it simple to track appointments, practices, dinners, and reminders all in one easy-to-see place. The Skylight calendar has been a game changer for my family. I don't know, my daughter's got something going on, feels like every night, whether it's dance, swim, different events with family, dinners, and it's nice to be able to just look at this calendar, see what's going on, and I know my wife appreciates not having to remind me all the time about what we have going on. I can see it clearly on this 15-inch HD screen. So check it out, folks, right now. Skylight is offering our listeners $30 off their 15-inch calendars by going to skylightcal.com/NFL. Go to skylightcal.com/NFL for $30 off your 15-inch calendar. That is skylightcal.com/NFL.
So I guess let's start with this. Dallas gives up a 3 and a 5 for George Pickens. You don't make this move without a corresponding contract extension, right? This is I can't imagine this is a 1-year rental that you're playing the game of, hey, if he balls out, we'll let him walk and get a comp 3 for him in 2027, right? Like, this is kind of a long-term piece here for the next couple of years.
You would like to think that. But I think we could all admit that we're a little nervous about Dallas and getting contract extensions done. And I don't think this is an easy situation to figure out, right? I mean, he's young. He's 24. He's had some good production. It hasn't had stable quarterback play. How does he see himself? Dallas, I think, struggles to get valuations right on players. So I agree with you in that there needed to be the intent of acquiring this player with a long-term extension in mind. But I think we can look at the situation on both ends and realize that's probably pretty complicated.
Yeah. And I think that the worry for Dallas, if you wait too,
they're comfortable waiting, Kyle Crabbs.
I know, but like I don't think this is one of those ones you can play the franchise tag game with George and make him mad. Like,
you don't want to live in that world. Nope.
You don't want to do that for a guy like George who, if you're going to give the assets to move for him, I think this deal needs to come together fairly quickly, in my opinion. It's because the worry that I have is there's been no coach in all of football the last decade that's done a better job of keeping players focused on the task at hand, regardless of their own personal self-interests, than Mike Tomlin, right? And the track record of Pittsburgh wide receivers and being on good behavior and not showing like stereotypical wide receiver tendencies in Pittsburgh versus outside of Pittsburgh. Almost everybody starts having more issues and is more vocal and more willing to voice their displeasure if they're not getting the ball when they go somewhere else outside of Pittsburgh. And going from, we don't really know what Brian Schottenheimer, the head coach, is going to be like, right? But we do know Dallas has not necessarily shied away from some of the distractions that exist with being an NFL franchise. I mean, they do the tours at the facility, and they like the spotlight. This organization historically has liked the spotlight. So taking George and putting him from Pittsburgh with under kind of the guidance of Mike Tomlin into a different environment, I would like to get that sorted out sooner rather than later so that George can be happy. Because what happens the first time CeeDee Lamb gets 20 targets and George gets 4?
It's going to happen.
Right? And that's for me, it's not about the talent. It's about, you got to make sure that you're giving the right amount of money to the right person to help you reach and attain your goals as a team. And that's the most complicated tightrope that I think Dallas now has to walk.
So how do we get to the right APY on this deal for George Pickens? Because it's so wide ranging. We just saw Chris Godwin sign for $22 million a season. We see
it'll probably be more than that.
Okay, Nico Collins at 24.25 per season. Are we not getting to T. Higgins territory? Are we? almost 29 per. So
I think the bargaining chips that he's going to use or his camp, I imagine, will use is both T. Higgins and Jaylen Waddle and Devonta Smith because they're wide receiver twos on their respective offenses.
So you think
upper 27 and 3/4 or 28 and 3/4, 28 and 1/4, and 25.
Well, I think that would make sense, but there's also the George Pickens layer. And there's a reason that Pittsburgh spent the time with him that they did and made this deal. It wasn't because they wanted to become less talented at wide receiver.
Yep, I think
they probably have a lot of concerns about committing big cap dollars to him long term.
And let's give the full picture here too, because this goes back to Georgia with George.
Oh,
right?
Of course.
George fell in the draft in part because of where's the right locker room for George Pickens, right? Like that Pittsburgh was part of the process.
Yeah.
But the other side of the coin for Dallas is that, John, I'm looking at the ages of all these contracts. George Pickens is 24. When does George Pickens turn 25?
Sometime this year. You thought I had that at the top of my head.
So March 2021. So he just turned 24.
Young man.
I'm looking at the top APY contracts and the ages of these players. You know how far down you have to get from like top APY down? How far down the list you have to get before you get somebody that's 24?
At the receiver position?
Yeah.
I guess St. Brown, probably your youngest guy?
26. T. Higgins is 26. Nico Collins is 26. Jerry Jeudy's 26. Khalil Shakir's 25. We're down in the 13s already.
Yeah.
And I still don't got a guy younger than George Pickens. You got to get that. You got to get the Marvin Harrison Jr.'s contract.
A rookie deal.
On a rookie deal in the top 10 to get a guy whose contract on an APY basis in that hierarchy for a guy that's younger than George Pickens is. So there's also he in theory has so much good football left. Right?
Right. You're not worried about age. Old. Yeah.
It's this really unique opportunity for a guy that you could put him anywhere in the top 25 APY in wide receiver contracts. He's going to be the youngest guy on the list.
Yep.
So that's part of the value for Dallas if it can be the right place and destination for him to be the best version of himself.
I think the conversation on slotting him into this offense is pretty easy. I think he's a good complementary skill set to CeeDee Lamb, who you want to play a lot in the slot. George, you feel, can play the X position. You can move him around a little bit. He's going to win on the outside, leverage battles, vertical plane stuff. I think you know exactly the type of receiver he is, and I think he complements CeeDee Lamb quite well. I think that part of the conversation is very easy. The skill set, the talent, who he is, how he fits. That's so straightforward. And they've had success with this type of profile. I mean, kind of looking at the lineage of Cowboys receivers, Irvin to Des Bryant to this guy. It's like super straightforward in terms of the player.
You can even have a guy like Cedric Wilson's best years of his career was in Dallas. And he's kind of built like that 6'2", a little bit more dense, has that physicality component to his game. And then he obviously had the injury. I think the historical track record of like a really physical player and what this means for CD to kind of be free to move around. And I'd let George play in isolation a lot.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And I'd move CD anytime I wanted to get motion for receiving eligible. If CD's got the cardio to do it, which he should have no problem with, like CD, get ready to run an extra 15 yards on every rep because we're going to have you in motion. Like I think that, and that makes CD so much more dangerous too.
Yeah, that's why you understood the idea. If they went Tet at pick 12, it would make a lot of sense. All right, so easy fit to the offense, complicated dynamics as it relates to the long-term security and contract for Pickens in Dallas. We're going to look at this deal from the Pittsburgh side of the equation on the other side of it. Folks, please be sure to stick with us. The NBA playoffs are in full swing. Every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it so easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. I've actually been enjoying the over-unders. I've been betting on game totals, over-under, and some player point projections. And, even though I haven't watched the NBA all season, I've been able to kind of just look at those trends and realize where the numbers are coming in. And I've had some success. I actually stayed up late and watched that Game 7 of the Nuggets and Clippers because I had action on the over and then it hit and it was really fun. So check it out. Which players are showing up in big moments? How could tracking those trends help you build your next bet? If you got a read on who's heating up, why not back it up with a parlay? So if you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com, place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA.
Two loose ends here on Dallas' side of things before we jump to Pittsburgh. Diana Rossini, 13 minutes ago, recapped every wide receiver trade the Cowboys have made since the start of 2023. 5 and 6 for Brandon Cooks, 4 for Mingo and a 7, and now a 3 and 5 for George Pickens and a 6. You're investing 6 draft picks to find a wide receiver too. They're gonna pay George Pickens, right? They just can't keep sending 2 draft picks every year to get wide receiver 2 figured out, right?
I would like to think, Kyle. Yeah. I would like to think.
Let's put the flags in the dirt and then go to Pittsburgh. What's the APY on the new contract?
3 years, 75. Give me $25 million per.
Okay, cool. I was leaning. I'll go over 25. And I think Dallas can maybe protect themselves with how they structure the guarantees there. But I'll go over 25 so he gets the win of more than Devonta Smith, who's on that $25 million APY.
All right. You're probably right about that. I went pretty safe.
I think if I was Dallas, I'd be pushing for exactly where you're at.
Yeah. Come on in. 3 years, 75 million. I don't think it's going to be a long deal. I think it'd be 3 years. He could hit it. He get a free agency again when he's 27.
Well, and that'll be the motivation from him, right? Is play well, play focused, and then you can cash in again still in the prime of your career for your third contract.
Yeah. And it protects Dallas to not be super committed in terms of years.
Right. All right. So for Pittsburgh, this ends up being an exchange. One of the guys who's in my wedding, Austin, you know Austin.
I do.
Big diehard Steelers fan. So I sent a text out this morning. And he's like, man, really killing the outlook for franchise quarterback Mason Rudolph. This is his first reaction for the Pittsburgh trade of Pickens. But DK's, I think for the style of player, would you rather have DK Metcalf or George Pickens?
DK Metcalf by $1 billion.
Okay. And so we're in the same boat there. There's going to be no fun disagreement here today on today's show like we had yesterday about the outlook of what Pittsburgh's X wide receiver is. This is I think it's the right guy to give, obviously, a super-sized contract to. It ended up being just short of $33 million APY was what the new money was on the pick, the Metcalf deal. But the rest of the receiving core, I think you look at part of the appeal of getting Metcalf was, man, you got these 2 supersized receivers that can win on the outside and win down the field. Roman Wilson pick comes back into the spotlight here a little bit with this draft choice.
And it should.
Yeah. A good player.
I thought he was.
But I think the thing that I worry about with Roman is how he profiles at the NFL level relative to they got a lot of tight ends and they get a back that can catch the football. And is there too much overlap with where I think Roman Wilson will win versus Freiermuth in the middle of the field, Jaylen Warren in the middle of the field? You kind of like to have a better profile as another one of the outside guys.
Well, and I think Calvin Austin is ahead of him for that similar type role within this offense. I agree with you, Kyle, and I think if you're Pittsburgh, I think you pivot to Amari Cooper or Keenan Allen. Just go sign one of those two guys, and I think you restore a lot of that. It's not a long-term play, but if you want to get that dynamic of size
Isn't Keenan at this stage kind of more the same thing, though?
Well, I'm saying if you wanted to restore the George Pickens to, big-bodied physical guys and Metcalf plus somebody, then you could go to the well there and restore some of what you thought you had there in the two towering receivers.
I'll tell you what, when they go, this has a chance to be the most physical 12 personnel team in football.
Well, yeah.
They signed Robert Woods, right?
He's going to block. Bobby Tree's going to block.
Bobby Trees is going to block. You also have Ben Skoranek back.
He's going to block. He's going to block.
DK Metcalf's going to block.
Going to block.
You know who didn't really block all that well, despite being a big physical guy?
George
Pickens. So, and then you go 12, and it's Freiermuth, Darnell Washington, Robert Woods, and DK Metcalf blocking for Caleb Johnson and Jaylen Warren. Okay, like we can punch in the mouth a little bit here. So you're not as talented, but you've seen a lot of successful organizations maybe move away from an individual talent, but the overall outlook of the entirety of the team and what you want to be and how you want to execute it. I think that's where Pittsburgh wakes up this morning and says, hey, we kind of replaced a lot of the assets we gave away to get DK Metcalf. We now don't have this lingering contract negotiation that's going to go into the summertime with a player that we don't know how much we want to get committed to. And for the physical profile of the player that's going to go in his place, we know we're going to get on passing downs, but also on running downs, we're going to get equal and even contribution and effort.
Which has been the Steelers script. This team's been able to make the playoffs, have winning records, not because they've had a great quarterback. It's because they run the football. They're physical on defense, get big plays on defense, or opportunistic on special teams. And I think this almost allows them to lean more into that script as their path at quarterback continues to be very, very complicated. And I don't know, it feels like maybe we're really shaping up for Mason Rudolph to be the guy this year.
Will Howard.
We'll have an open competition.
Yep.
We got a couple playoff starters here in Skylar Thompson and Mason Rudolph.
Stop.
They played against my team.
Yeah.
I'm fully aware of this.
I had to sit here and watch Skylar Thompson
almost win the game. Had a game-winning drive.
Yeah, if you get below average quarterback play in that game, they probably do win that game.
Yeah, you just needed below average. That's all you needed.
I just needed not bottom 5 EPA quarterback performance in a wild card round in the last 20 years.
He'd have won the game. Ended the Bills season for sure. So they're certainly. I understand for the Pittsburgh side of this equation that you probably didn't want to commit long-term to Pickens, especially after what you've brought in Metcalf. And I like the point that you made in that you restore a lot of what you gave up to get Metcalf. So I like the swap there. There's a lot of steps to kind of doing that.
Yeah.
But I get it. And you do have young players. I mean, there's veterans out there that you can add to this mix. But for Pittsburgh, it just comes down to, are we going to get a quarterback at some point that is going to maximize what the rest of this team is?
And Pittsburgh, 32, 31, 30, 29, 28, 27, 26, 25. They're 25th in the NFL cash spending right now. Presumably leaving some budget for Aaron Rodgers to be a piece of that puzzle. They're probably going to have to figure out a readjustment for TJ Watt based on the recent reset of the edge market, which absolutely exploded.
Yeah.
Right. So you're keeping your eye on a couple of different things. We paid DK Metcalf. We're flirting with Aaron Rodgers to be the quarterback this year. TJ Watt suddenly grossly underpaid relative to his peers. I think they have some other possible things that they have to readjust and figure out that is keeping Pickens kind of, it felt like an inevitability of, the long-term viability here was not going to be there.
Yeah.
So to get what you can and get as close to break even as you can to get maybe an older player, but a player maybe you're more excited about for the ceiling and the consistency level. I think we're in good shape if we're Pittsburgh to kind of play the same script, and you're hoping you get the quarterback that can kind of change the outlook of the football team's ceiling this year upcoming.
And I don't love signing up for Aaron Rodgers. Like, don't get me wrong. I wouldn't do it. But I would understand it for Pittsburgh because I do think that this remainder of team takes a lot of pressure off of Aaron Rodgers to have to feel like he needs to be the NFL MVP. If like he can just embrace doing the smart right thing with the football, not turning it over, leaning into a good offensive line, what should be a good rushing offense. You should have players that can maximize your accuracy, which is still there for Aaron. I thought for Aaron, what got him in trouble last year was he didn't have the pocket movement skills that he used to have. And so when he tries to extend those plays and play a little bit off script, didn't have the juice to do it. But if you can just play within rhythm and run the offense, run the ball, like you're going to have a good defense here. Like there's a good recipe here. You got a chance. So if they do go with that direction, I think you can cling to those elements and feel like you got a shot.
Yep. So it'll be really interesting to see how it all plays out. There's more dust to be settled after this move, but you and I had a couple ideas brainstormed this morning for a show, and then we got a George Pickens trade, and we said, okay, well, let's talk about the George Pickens trade. So we're reacting to it as close to in real time as we could with our recording schedule. Hopefully this will be up before 10, right?
Should be. Yeah.
So it'll still be there'll be people rolling out of bed potentially on the West Coast, seeing the news, and we'll have the show readily available for them.
Yeah. Big dubs for us today.
That's right. Big win for the brand. So let us know what you think of the Pickens trade in the comments. And we will be back again tomorrow with some more maybe NFL draft fallout, maybe previewing, and then takes on Friday. And we've decided we're rolling with the roster assessment starting next week. So
more things change, more they stay the same, right?
That's right. Another year and another cycle through grading some rosters, which will be really fun. And we'll figure out which division gets the spotlight first, probably by Friday. So hit subscribe, follow along, take the ride with us this summer. We're going to have a great time. Kyle Crabbs, Joe Marino, appreciate you guys as always checking the show. You can keep it locked in right here on the Locked On Network. That's going to do it for us here today on Locked On NFL Scouting.